Three #1 seeds in action on Sunday, and for Houston, it was survive and advance. Houston hangs on in overtime against Texas A&M. The Aggies force overtime thanks to that right there. Anderson Garcia, who beat the buzzer with his 9th three-pointer of the season. Then in OT, Emmanuel Sharp and the Cougars find a way. Sharp hit 7 three-pointers, leading the way with 30 points, but he was one of 4 Cougars who fouled out. Houston advances to its 5th straight Sweet 16. They'll play Duke in Dallas. Donovan Clingan dominating in Brooklyn, 14 points, 14 rebounds, and 8 blocks, the most blocks ever by a UConn player in an NCAA tournament game as UConn defeats Northwestern 75-58. Kling Kong in Connecticut, the first defending champ to reach the Sweet 16 since Duke in 2016. Huskies advance to Boston, where they'll face San Diego State in a rematch of last year's national championship. From one big man to another, reigning National Player of the Year Zach Edey and Purdue crushed Utah State, winning by 39. Edey had another double-double. First player with 50 points, 35 rebounds, while shooting 65% through 2 games of an NCAA tournament since Kareem in 1968. Boilermakers advanced to the Sweet 16 to play Gonzaga, who they beat earlier this season at the Maui Invitational. All right, back here with Chip Patterson. UConn and Purdue making opening week statements in the Big Dance. Huskies outscored their 2 opponents by 56. Boilermakers outscored their 2 opponents by 67. Chip, what'd you take away from what both schools did this weekend?
For UConn, I think there's a lot to work on. I think that we're going to have the perfectionist Dan Hurley be able to put up that 40-35 second half where Northwestern was able to climb back into the game. But there was just excellence from the Huskies in the first half. In the wash, I think it's pretty good. But Purdue has been the most impressive team in this NCAA tournament to me so far. Those wins, 28 points, 39 points. The noise around everything that was going to happen after FDU last season. So we've talked a lot about the Virginia model, right? You lose to the 16, you come back, you win the national championship. Was it Zach Edey? Yes. But it was also the supporting cast and the way that all the pieces fit together for the Boilermakers. I think that UConn probably meets expectations. Purdue exceeds my expectations with this first weekend.
Yeah, they're out to prove something. They're looking to go from one and done to one shining moment. And what if these two teams meet in the national championship, a battle of the big men, Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey? Sign me up. We will wait to see. Show me the bracket, how sweet it is. Here's a look at the Sweet 16 East region in Boston. #1 overall seed UConn facing San Diego State in a rematch of the national championship. Iowa State clashing with Illinois. Those games will be played on Thursday. Also on Thursday, the West region in Los Angeles. 1 seed North Carolina taking on Alabama. Arizona against Clemson. Then the South region in Dallas looks like this. #1 seed Houston survives. They'll take on Duke. Marquette playing NC State on Friday. And in the Midwest, it's Purdue against Gonzaga and Creighton clashing with Tennessee in Detroit. Both games on Friday. Who will be elite? We're about to find out. Back here with Chip Patterson here to make his picks down to the Sweet 16. Let's start in the East. #1 overall seed UConn, San Diego State, Iowa State, and Illinois. Who you got coming out of Boston?
Hakeem, the East is a beast, but I'm not going to overthink this. I'm going to think the UConn Huskies are going to go into this week. They're going to get refocused, and they are going to show up in Boston, Stores North, I guess,
Give it
with
to me.
a lot of noise behind them. And I think that Donovan Clingan is the secret sauce because Tristan Newton can make this thing go, but Danny Hurley has been working Donovan Clingan into the place where he can take over and be Kling Kong. We heard from Danny Hurley after the game. He said, look, he's finally healthy. And yes, Donovan Clingan missed a half dozen games and now finally seems to have his legs about him at the perfect time. There is Zach Edey out there, but other than Edey, there are a few players who can be as individually impactful on both ends as Donovan Clingan. I like the Huskies to advance to the Final Four.
All right, that's my pick as well. In the West, you've got North Carolina, Alabama, Arizona, Clemson. Who's winning this region in Los Angeles?
The only one of those teams I can trust to play any daggum defense, and it's the team that was led by daggum Roy Williams. That is the North Carolina Tar Heels, because that's where we saw the Tar Heels really flip the script against Michigan State. It was on the defensive end. When North Carolina won 10 games in a row early this season on the way to an ACC regular season title, it was the defensive side. And that is a weakness for Alabama. That is something that is questionable for Clemson. And while Arizona statistically certainly has good efficiency numbers on the defensive end, I do not trust them as much with all their different pieces, quite like I do with North Carolina. North Carolina has the high end with ACC Player of the Year R.J. Davis and Armando Bacot, but they also have the complementary pieces, Cormac Ryan, Harrison Ingram, Jalen Withers coming off the bench. I like the Tar Heels to be able to make it out of Los Angeles where the stars will be shining. All
right, in the South region in Dallas, we've got Houston, Duke, Marquette, and NC State. So that's basically a virtual home game for Houston. They're going to have to face Duke there in the Sweet 16. Who's representing the South region?
I am a prisoner of the moment Patterson right now, because everything I saw on Sunday has totally flipped the way I see this region playing out. It starts early when we saw Duke absolutely dismantle James Madison, calling midnight on Cinderella. It was McCain, it was Proctor, it was all of the firepower that we have been waiting to see from this Duke team throughout the year, and what I think was maybe their best performance of the entire season. At the same time, this Houston team that allowed a lot of points at an unusually high efficiency from Texas A&M. The Cougars had enough answers offensively to be able to advance to the Sweet 16, but it was some of those defensive shortcomings against the Aggies that make me think that Duke could be a real problem. I've got Duke taking out Houston and then advancing on to the Final Four. And hopefully, for my friends in the Triangle, that's a Duke-NC State Elite Eight matchup. But we'll see. I got the Blue Devils going to the Final Four.
Well, you remember what happened to Houston last season in the tournament. They lost to Miami.
Yep.
Miami was able to score points on them, just like Texas A&M here in this game. And Duke, when tested, they can run it up if they need to. So, look, if one of these – look, defense wins in the tournament. That's the thing. So I don't know if I'm ready to crown Duke in this one, but if you're going Duke, I'll ride with you.
I won't take Duke to cut down the nets in Glendale.
Okay.
I'll take them to cut down the nets in Dallas.
Okay, fair enough. All right, now to the Midwest region, which I've been calling the Prove It region. Played in Detroit, which is appropriate. They're hustling. They're getting after it. Purdue, Gonzaga, Creighton, and Tennessee. Who's coming out of the Midwest?
First, I think the winner of Purdue-Gonzaga wins the region.
Okay.
I think that Tennessee's offense left them in Charlotte in the second round against Texas. And I think that while Creighton had the heroics of that double overtime against Oregon, a game that I loved being able to watch and talk about, they probably shouldn't have been in that position against Oregon. Very abnormal two-point offense there. So that's why I'm going to Purdue, the team that, like I said at the top, impressed me more than anyone else in this first weekend of the NCAA tournament. It's so much more than Zach Edey, and Zach Edey is so much more than just being big. All the pieces are working together. They are older, and when they were scared to shoot the players other than Zach Edey against Fairleigh Dickinson last year, there's not that kind of fear from the Boilermakers right now. So I think that Purdue-Gonzaga decides the region. I've got Purdue over Gonzaga in that game right now. Give me Matt Painter and the Boilermakers over the hump into the Final Four.
Matt Painter's greatest masterpiece, a national championship, or a Sweet 16 win, at least for now. For now, it's just a second-round win. So we'll see if we get there. So your Final Four is UConn, North Carolina, Duke, and Purdue.
Yes.
Who's your pick to cut down the nets in Phoenix?
The Huskies. I mean, UConn is going to show up like it was joked by San Diego State coach Brian Dutcher. I mean, he called the East Regional the UConn Invitational. Let's be honest. The NCAA tournament is the UConn Invitational. The Huskies have been operating at a different level than almost anybody else in the country. And while you could argue over the order of the top three teams, there was a common sense variable that goes into my Chipolytics. And it was just the fact that when I watch UConn play basketball, they have more ways to win, they have more players to beat you, and it does not matter the style. They can win a low-scoring grinder, they can win a high-scoring track meet. They have all of the answers to whatever you want to do, and that well-roundedness and that complete dominance that they can show. I trust them more than any of these other teams that are left in the Sweet 16. Give me UConn to do something that hasn't been done since Florida and go back-to-back national titles.
You said the Chipalytics, so that's your analytic situation here, the Chipalytics.
Science
like
and
your
vibes.
power ranking.
Yeah, it's like arts and sciences, a little bit of everything. You cook it all together.
I like that. Chipalytics and UConn cutting down the nets, according to Chip Patterson here on CBS Sports HQ. Here's a look at the odds to win the national championship. It's UConn, plus 210, trying to become the first repeat national champ since Florida in 2006, 2007. Chomp, chomp.